Good morning, everyone. It's August 11th, 2025, and this is the Washington Monthly Politics live stream. On today's show, Trump's tariffs take effect, the redistricting drama in Texas escalates nationwide, and Trump unveils some new weapons in his war on higher ed. And as we speak, Trump is announcing plans to mobilize troops in DC. I'm Ann Kim, senior editor at Washington Monthly, and I'm joined this morning, as usual, by Paul Glastris, the monthly's editor in chief, and Bill Scher, politics editor. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so let's turn first to Trump's tariffs, which have finally gone into effect. On average, we're talking about 15% baseline tariffs on most goods coming to the United States now, plus higher tariffs against certain countries that Trump is targeting for a variety of reasons. That includes a 50% potential tariff on Brazil for its prosecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro, who's accused of staging a coup after losing an election. Figure that. And 50% tariffs against India for buying Russian oil. So here's, I've got this little clip here of what Trump told Kristen Welker a few months ago on Meet the Press about what he hoped these tariffs would accomplish.
Tariffs are going to make us rich. We're going to be a very rich country.
Right. So, Bill, you wrote a recent column for the Washington Monthly that disputes the president's conclusion here. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the clip that you showed, this is a line that Trump has given for a long time because he talks as if the federal government collects more revenue in tariffs, that we're a wealthy country. That's not how most people really look at wealth. It doesn't mean that you and I get more money if the federal government collects more money in revenue. Uh, And it does seem like we are collecting more revenue from tariffs than before. We have that data from the Treasury Department, the CNN, and the New York Times. Did tabulations with it. So uh, this is from the article that I wrote. Tariff revenue in 2024 totaled 98.4 billion. If the July 2025 tariff number, this is the peak what we've had in the past year, probably for a very long time before then. If the July 2025 tariff number of 29.6 billion reflects what we will be paying going forward, the annual cost will be 355.2 billion. So that's a lot more money into the federal government coffers. But remember, we're paying that. Whether you're an individual or a business, that's not you getting wealthier. That's the government taking more into the Treasury Department. And you may not feel it as much as of late. There's been some articles about this because businesses have been trying to absorb the cost. They don't want to pass down the cost until they absolutely have to. So the pinch hasn't been that hard. But businesses are saying we can't keep doing this, and now more tariffs are coming. This is numbers through July. The bigger wave just kicked in last week. But what's always hard to know is how much is the fall they're going to continue, because Trump is so erratic. There could be a deal tomorrow. There could be a new tariff the next day. So it's hard to fully extrapolate. But as it stands, these numbers are going higher and higher every month since April, and to go even higher still based on what he just did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like I just put up a little clip here, but every day there's a news story, in particular about small businesses that are getting hit by this. And it seems that even large companies like Walmart and Amazon are beginning to announce, that they're going to be doing price increases. And let's not forget that these are incredibly regressive taxes. I mean, we're talking about red states that are going to be hit the worst, right, on paying these
Well,
taxes.
not only are the tariffs regressive, I mean, if you're middle class or working class, you pay a larger share of your wealth in goods than someone who's a
Mm-hmm.
mega millionaire. And this has been known about tariffs going back to the 19th century. This is why we got rid of a lot of these tariffs, because people understood it was a very regressive system. Uh, Trump just passed a tax cut bill, which he calls the One Big Beautiful Bill. Uh, but the tax breaks in that bill are also skewed to the wealthy. That is also a very regressive bill. In fact, there are analyses that say if you're in the bottom 40%, you're actually going to pay more or lose more of your income in the net of all of this, with everything else in the bill. Uh, so it's regressiveness on top of regressiveness. And I think it's a huge opportunity for Democrats going into 2026, 2028 to say, they're often on the back foot with Republicans saying we're the party of tax cuts and Democrats want to raise taxes. Democrats can more easily say, we got a great way to relieve you on taxes. We're going to make those tariffs go poof. Instant tax cut for the working class. And if we need that revenue so badly to alleviate our debt burdens, well, we can replace that with tax increases on the wealthy who got a sweet deal from the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what's peculiar about the coverage, and Bill, you pointed out in this column too, is that the New York Times, the article at least, said that the revenue from the tariffs is going to be so addictive that it's going to be hard to roll them back. And you push back against that, and I have to agree with you. It seems like the burden is going to be so instantaneous and so severe and so noticeable that it's going to be difficult to get addicted to the tariffs, as some of the press coverage is suggesting.
Yeah, the addiction argument stems from we do have historically high debt, post World War II debt levels, and the Trump bill, the budget reconciliation bill, is going to make that worse. There's debate over how serious a problem that is, how much debt level can you carry. I don't want to adjudicate that there. I don't have a strong opinion about it. But there is an argument that we have to do something to alleviate that. And if you got this revenue stream from tariffs and you don't have to do anything to keep it, you have to do something to get rid of it or do something to switch to another revenue stream. Congress can gridlock, of course, and do nothing. But if you have a Democratic trifecta after 2028, Democrats can very easily get that trifecta by saying, I got an idea for you to have a lower cost living. It is get rid of Trump's ridiculous tariffs. It's a slam dunk layup that I don't think will be hard for Democrats to politically pursue.
Yeah. And in the meantime, you have this ridiculous idea that's being floated too about rebates on the tariffs, as if the electorate won't see through that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they will.
Well, there is one of the potential wrinkles here is what's going to happen in the courts, because there is an argument that it's being litigated. Trump has already lost some lower court rulings, saying he's asserting power that he doesn't have, and you could have a judicial ruling that says these tariffs were illegal. Trump administration, pay these people back. You took money that wasn't yours, pay them back. Now, logistically, that probably be very complicated. I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but it's on the table as a theoretical possibility. And then you might see some payments happening. I think for Democrats to propose a rebate as a policy is probably pretty complicated and more than you probably have to do to win votes and alleviate people's burdens.
Yeah, no, I mean, like the Republicans were starting to, to propose these rebates as a way of, well, basically they're acknowledging that they're going to take a bite out of people's budgets from doing so. The funny thing about the rebate idea, of course, is that, I don't know, Paul, if you remember back in, 10 years ago, when we were all talking about carbon taxes and consumption taxes, and how do you make the carbon tax less regressive by giving a rebate to people to alleviate that burden.
Yeah, it's sort of how you put the lipstick on the pig of an unpopular policy.
Exactly.
Well, the other thing that's going on here is that the public is beginning to see price increases, and it's kind of thrown the press off that inflation doesn't seem to be all that higher going into this summer than it was prior to the beginning of this escalation of tariffs. But at the public level, the Biden administration was, at the national level, the Biden administration was saying, no, the economy is getting better, and people were saying, no, it's not getting better. We have the same thing going on with the public now. And the big newsletter has a piece out today about the freak out that's happening on TikTok as people perceive that back to school prices this year are way higher. 20, 30, 40% of the public is now complaining of back to school prices that they can't afford. And on top of that, the big retailers are using this moment to bring in what's called dynamic pricing, right? First of all, you look at these TikToks and people are saying, look, they've scratched out the old price or they've whited out the old price and the new price is now 30% higher on everything from, swim trunks to home decor to groceries. But what they're also doing is taking off the prices, and now you have to go in at Walmart and other retailers and use your phone, scan a code to get the price. And that price can change by the hour, by the day. And people hate it because they can't plan their budgets if they don't know going into the store what the price is going to be. And the larger context here is it's true that a lot of companies have held off increasing prices until now. But and you were right, the smaller businesses have less capacity to eat their losses for a while. But what's also happening, and we've talked about this, I believe, on this program, but certainly internally, the large corporations are going to, and you're seeing this on the earnings calls from the big publicly traded company CEOs. They're using this as an excuse to bring in this dynamic pricing to be able to essentially extract more profit, right? They can know by your phone what your income is and charge you more for diapers than the next person, right? They can see that there is a diaper shortage coming in 2 weeks and jack up prices. So this is a pricing power that big retailers have wanted to use. They're going to use it now, as whether they need to be passing on the prices or not from the tariffs. They're going to use it as an excuse to jack up prices. So the public, this long-winded way of saying, the public hasn't seen the pricing increases that they're about to be hit with.
Yeah, yeah. It's like airline pricing coming to your school
Yes.
and backpacks. Yeah, yeah. So let's turn to redistricting. Texas has been, trying to redraw its map in order to gain 5 Republican seats. Democratic lawmakers have fled the state in order to break the quorum and prevent this plan from succeeding. Abbott has issued civil arrest warrants. I've lost track of all the escalation in trying to track down these lawmakers. But meanwhile, blue state governors in California and New York, for instance, are talking about kind of doing the same thing, hatching their own redistricting plans. And there are even some strategists who think that Democrats should go further. I was kind of struck by this op-ed in the Washington Post over the weekend by strategists Arkady Gurney and Sarah Knight, and they propose what they call going nuclear. And they say that blue states should even start retaliating against Texas-based companies. For instance, they say, quote, blue states could band together to divest pension fund investments from and bar state contracts with Texas companies. Um, okay, what do you guys think about that particular escalation of tactics? And do you think Democrats are doing the right thing so far?
Well, I think Democrats are doing the right thing so far. They have Texas Democrats have no obligation to be handmaidens for what Republicans are trying to do. But having said that, I think I mentioned this in the last show. I suspect the Republican gerrymander is going to backfire on them. It's very heavily reliant on gains in Latino majority districts, which has not been a reliable group for Republicans. They've made gains there. Those gains could easily recede in a wave election, which 2026 could well be. Which is why I wrote this. The op-ed that you shared struck me as very excessive, because they're talking about things like having other states punish Texas economically, trying to poach workers or ban contracts with their companies, try to do it in kind of a coy way to try to survive legal challenge, but not a lot of explanation how they could actually execute that and escape being slapped down by courts. So it'd probably involve a lot of years of litigation, and might well not even be able to be implemented right away. If you win the case, there's legal costs you'd have to take on to do it. And for what? Texas is trying to squeeze out 5 more seats. They may not even successfully do it on election day. And the average pickup for the opposition party is 25 seats. Democrats need 3 to win back the House. And if other states fight fire with their own gerrymandering, I'm totally fine with that. And I generally feel like partisan gerrymandering ends up being largely a wash at the end of the day. So I don't see the need to really try to push the envelope again to economic warfare, which could really backfire politically and may not even be necessary.
Yeah, it seems reflective of some, broader frustration, I think, among rank and file Democrats that the party just isn't doing enough. The Democrats are always playing by the rules, playing nice, confirming Senate, nominees that they don't like just to kind of keep things going. And maybe it's more a reflection of that, this frustration, versus a real idea. I'm not sure. But
Well, there's always that undercurrent,
yeah.
and those who are prone to complain that Democrats aren't fighting hard enough come up with wilder and wilder ideas to try to prove that you mean business. Uh, and it's always a balancing act between fighting hard and fighting smart. Uh, and it's very easy to write an op-ed that has the hardest. Here's how you go the absolute hardest, and not consider at all what the downside optics might be in doing that, because on your 750 word column, you can make everything perfect. So again, I have no problem, with Democrats responding in kind with their own gerrymandering ploys, because I don't think if everybody does it, you're still going to get a total House that probably is reflective of public opinion. So I don't see it as being unfair. But you get into economic warfare, I think that's going to really rub a lot of people the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Paul, if you could weigh in on the bigger picture here, I mean, it is kind of a perennial problem with Democrats in a way, because they had been sort of outflanked repeatedly over decades on messaging. You had the death tax, the inheritance tax battle, and like the death panels, and so messaging GOP, it has been much more effective. And so it's been kind of this perennial complaint the Democrats are, not up to snuff with their 10-point plans and complicated nuance. Like, so this particular set of suggestions really just seems like a proxy for some more aggressive version of the Democratic Party that some people want to see. Do you think that's the right tactic, or given your experience, Paul, with other administrations that have been successful in fighting, GOP, what the right strategy should be?
I don't know about this particular set of ideas of, hiking up the level of economic warfare. And to be fair to the authors, what they're saying is you threaten this the way in the Cold War, each side threatened the other with destruction of their cities, not because you want to destroy their cities, but because you want to strike enough terror that neither side uses the weapon, right? And what they're arguing is that blue states have far bigger economic footprints than red states. If they band together and they threaten economic warfare, that might be enough for Republicans to sort of think twice about pushing their side to the maximal, turning their side up to 11. So I don't have an opinion, because, as Bill said, there's just not a whole lot of detail there about, but Democrats have used pension funds for many years to advance political interests. In some sense, this isn't that new. It is, there's more to it in this article. But what I would say is the Trump administration is being aggressively creative with policy in a way I don't think very many people foresaw. We see every day some new use of federal power that may or may not be constitutional, but there's no one there to tell them not to do it. And Democrats have to be thinking, if not now, because their power is limited to states and backbench press releases in Congress, if not now, in the future, what are the policies that they're going to pursue that are creative and aggressive? Um, is the administration now having set a precedent and the Supreme Court having allowed a lot of this expansion of power, setting itself up for when the Democrats come back using those levers itself? And I do think there's a ripe opportunity here, if not in the moment, for the, planning for the future about what the Democratic agenda will be, and arguing openly with voters that, um, just you wait and see. I do think there's something to that.
Mm. Well, speaking of economic warfare and creative uses of policy, let's turn to Trump's escalation in the fight against higher ed. So there have been a couple developments here. The first is that the administration is now demanding that colleges hand over all admissions data, including on race, grades, and standardized test scores. Columbia and Brown have actually agreed to do this as part of their quote unquote settlements with the government. Um, Paul, you've been the arbiter of the college guide for 20 years now for the Washington Monthly. And what do you think the long term implications of this particular move are going to be for college admissions and accessibility and all the things that the college guide has stood for the last 2 decades?
Well, the way I look at it, Ann, is this is the Trump administration following everyone else in putting all its focus on elite universities, which educate 5% of the students. And a lot of this battle that the administration is waging against these hated elite institutions is trickling down into damage into the universities, the community colleges, even that educate 90% of college students. And most of these universities don't have big DEI budgets. They didn't have big protests during Gaza. They're not rife with, woke classrooms. They're mostly people going to marketing classes taught by adjunct professors who have normal politics, right? That's the real truth of higher ed. But there is a kind of a conspiracy in the media and in politics to make everything about Columbia. So part of me just kind of is upset that this battle is going to again screw the average college student. Um, in particular, the use uh, of civil rights law to uh, uh, manipulate how colleges behave uh, goes back to efforts to stop discrimination on universities, and got caught up in the whole debate over affirmative action, which, as you know, the Washington Monthly has argued has been problematic for a long time, and there's ways of increasing diversity without that. But nevertheless, this was the avenue that the administration is now using to unlock the data and punish these universities. Um, but they're doing new things. Just last week, the administration said, we're going to demand that elite universities give us all their data on patents that were created with the use of federal funds, because there is language in a bill that was passed decades ago that says the administration, that the federal government can march in, is the term, march in rights, and take back the patents if they're not being used in the public interest. And again, a very creative, diabolically creative, aggressive use of policy.
Yeah, that was the second thing I was going to ask about. One small point that's a consolation on the data point is that the New York Times reported that there's literally no one actually available to collect all the race and admissions data anyway, because of the 100 people who worked for the National Center on Education Statistics, only four of them are left. So it may end up being kind of a toothless thing, but it does set a bad precedent, as Paul, you were saying about um, defining merit. And like it or not, what happens with the elite colleges does trickle down to everyone else. So yeah, on this other piece about Harvard and threatening to take away the university's patents, or rather to compulsorily, it's a compulsory licensing regime under the Bayh-Dole Act, right? So
Right.
that I think, as I understand it, the statute allows the government to march in if there are particular health and safety concerns that are not being met. So for instance, there had been talk of compulsory licensing of AIDS medications in order to make them more, available in Africa, for instance. And this is actually something that the monthly has supported in the past in different contexts. So, Paul, I would love for you to clarify, you know, the intent of the statute and the places in which it's supposed to be used and how that's an abuse in this particular context.
Well, I'm not a patent lawyer. I'm not even a lawyer, but we have at the monthly done considerable reporting by people who know the subject, and our read of it is, yes, the federal government has the ability to utilize this clear statutory power uh, to uh, force the use of these patents in ways that advantage the American people. Um, and we were arguing that they should do so to lower drug prices uh, by taking the patents away from drug companies that misuse them, and providing other means of producing these drugs in order to lower prices. The Trump administration is not going after the drug companies, it's going after the universities using the same statutory language. So it could well be legal, with a pliant Supreme Court. Maybe it becomes constitutional, but it's for a very different cause. And we really don't know much about what they're going to proposing to do with this statutory power. Apparently, um, they're going to say, we want to be able to use the patents that the federal taxpayer paid the university to create that innovation. We want to use our ownership rights, for lack of a better term, to make sure those patents go to creating manufacturing jobs in the United States. Harvard, you haven't used your patents to do that. Therefore, you lose them and we get them. We'll see.
Yeah, and we'll see. And it is an important distinction here that we're only talking about patents where the federal government has some claim, so to speak, because they gave research funding, oftentimes in pure science, but also in applied science, that led to the patent. So it's not a situation where the federal government can march in and grab any patent. There really
Correct.
has to be that nexus of the funding that's there. And my understanding is that there has to be, the statute is pretty clear about the very particular circumstances that have to justify compulsory licensing of that patent, because patents are actually protected in the US
Right.
Constitution.
Right.
It's the founding fathers felt very strongly about intellectual property as a means of creating economic growth and patent rights. So you'll see, but yes, we'll see, but it is something that will be litigated for a very, very long time.
But it does go to the point that there seems to be more aggressive use of policymaking on the Republican side than the Democratic side. When we started writing about this issue, arguing for march-in rights to bring down drug prices, it was when the Obama administration spent years debating it internally and not doing it. Uh, then Biden comes in, and they spent several years actually advancing the ball, but left office without doing it. Donald Trump's been in office 6 months, and they're already doing it. So that gives you a pretty good measure of the willingness of one party to push the envelope versus the other.
Yeah. Okay, so to wrap things up, as we speak, Donald Trump is making announcements about the pending militarization of DC. So, what are you guys expecting from that? What are you expecting the response to be, and what else are you watching for this week?
I mean, it's another case of Donald Trump, inventing an issue out of nothing. Crime is down in D.C. There was a high-profile incident involving, someone that he knew personally, and so he's made that into a giant issue, and to give a justification for federal intrusion. Uh, I mean, to Paul's point, I mean, this is how the Trump administration operates. They're on full tilt all the time to aggressively uh, uh, deploy and weaponize the power of the federal government when it suits their political games. Otherwise, they're hyper libertarian. They're denying more disaster relief, even in not just in blue areas but in red areas. They're decimating the federal workforce. They've decimated the Medicaid program, which is going to affect a lot of people. Again, not just in blue areas but in red areas in terms of their healthcare coverage is concerned. Uh, they want to take down the Department of Education. They flinched on freezing money this school year a couple weeks ago, but they seem eager to kind of go down that path too, and that could also affect a lot of real Americans across the country. Uh, so so what you can sort of credit them for diabolical creativity, but I think Democrats are going to be very well positioned to say these folks want to use the federal government to serve their own ends, and they don't want to use it at all to help you. That's I mean, if you cared about the future of the Republican Party, you'd be more worried about that backlash. Donald Trump is not somebody who thinks 3 steps ahead, doesn't care about who he passes the torch to, doesn't care about what the party shape is going to be in once he's gone. He cares about the 24/7 news cycle. If he wants to have turn DC into his personal playground for a news cycle, he's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the DC play gets Donald Trump nationally. Right? It upsets voters, or at least a lot of voters, probably most voters in DC.
They're already upset.
But they didn't vote for him, and I'm not sure how many people in Arizona or Ohio or wherever care that much. But the press corps here will follow it, and it will certainly be a better story than some other stories that might be percolating. Jeffrey Epstein. But yeah, but again, I agree that what may, in the end, I suspect in the end, will bring down the Republican Party and Donald Trump is this overreach, this aggressive policy overreach, this not having thought through some of this stuff. But that isn't, I think, I wouldn't take away from that the lesson that Democrats shouldn't be aggressive, because it's going to take real aggressive policymaking to deliver to voters what they clearly want, which is affordability, lower prices, better incomes. All of that is going to take much stronger use of federal power than the Biden administration even used. And so Democrats are going to have to think very hard about how to do that, how to deliver on the promise that they're going to make when next they have a shot at the voters.
Yep. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. And Bill, I'm expecting to hear from you in a couple of weeks about the pending government shutdown. We're starting that up again. So,
Well, exactly. I mean, I'm still waiting to see if there's going to be any real. Are Democrats going to really negotiate these deals? Or are they going to say we're walking away from the table, which is what I proposed? It all seems to be kind of in limbo right now. There's not a lot of activity. Granted, they're in recess in August, but the September 30th deadline's not that far away. You might want to see some action if you want a certain outcome, and it seems like everyone's just kind of standing pat.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this Friday meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska, where it looks like they're setting Ukraine up for a fall right? There was all this talk that Trump was going to get tough. People, long time viewers of Putin and Ukraine could tell it was nonsense, but a lot of people in the press bought it because Trump seemed to pivot away and be angry at Putin. That looks like that was never true, but let's keep an eye on Friday and see just how bad it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I put in a plug for an upcoming piece by Tamara Jacoby, who is the de facto Kyiv correspondent for the Washington Monthly. She's going to have a piece this week on how Ukrainians are feeling about this upcoming trilateral meeting, summit, whatever you may call it. Also want to put in a plug for this week's episode of the podcast where we talked to Christopher Hooks, journalist who wrote for the Texas Monthly, about how Texas is actually becoming a little bit like California in its use of heavy-handed regulatory and policy maneuvers to kind of impose a conservative vision of Texas on everyone. So it turned out to be a really interesting episode. Final plug, please share, like, and subscribe, and definitely go to our website, WashingtonMonthly.com, to read Bill's columns and to keep an eye out for the college guide, which is coming out in 2 weeks, right, Paul?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, everyone, take care, and we'll see you next week.